Welcome, Sanjay. I
Thank
wanted.
you, Anil. It's great to be here. I know you're a swimming bud, so I'm very happy to see you in clothes.
Okay, thank you for the humorous introduction of me. And Sanjay, I wanted to begin with Operation Sindoor. Like I pointed out in the introduction, it showcased India's abilities at fighting a modern-day war very unambiguously. But at the same time, I was looking at these defense stocks which are listed, and I looked at the Nifty index, that they have a defense index, and I looked at the Nifty 100. So in March, almost both of them were at the same level, approximately. By May, when the conflict began, these stocks took off, and the Nifty defense stock just rose very sharply. In fact, the gap is now some 50 points. So, what does it tell us about this whole role of the private sector in defense?
Well, reminds me of a very interesting quote I remember. It's called "The Undertaker in a Plague." War is not good for anybody, but a plague is not good for anybody, but for the undertakers. War is great news for people who build stuff that enable countries to go to war, obviously, and the businesses that help nations go to war are going to benefit from that. And the stock markets are only a reflection of what's happened over there. So, as you know, I'm a investor, uh, and I'm also a professor. I'm not going to talk about any specific stock, but clearly, the stocks that have gone up, they've gone up for a reason. Um, there is, and in my personal view, there is over optimism over there, and I'm not saying that from an investor point of view. I think a lot of that optimism is warranted, and I'm actually quite thrilled about what's happening. Let's back up a bit, as you mentioned. We have to look at it holistically, and what's happening in that space, and we can draw parallels from history. So there is clearly an inflection point here. So I think India is going to become one of the world's leading exporters of defense equipment. I feel that clearly, and I think you also agree with me. And we have shared a lot of experiences, and you've done a lot of work in this space. So my previous podcast was done a few weeks ago, and many of the viewers were wondering who was the interviewer. I think I hope that the same thing will happen. I'm going to draw on some of your experiences and your colleagues. Nitin has done some wonderful work in that space also. So, so I think we can talk about a few buckets here. There are a lot of things. One of the things is from an investment point of view, from a business analyst point of view, the way I think about this first thing is about incentives. Let's talk about incentives. So, what is the role of financial markets? So yeah, if you look at the valuations you mentioned, the Nifty Defense Index, so the valuations are very high. But what does that imply for us? So when valuations go up a lot, it creates incentives for entrepreneurs to go public. There are companies which are already in the defense space, and you've done a lot of work in that. There is a bunch of companies that are in the unlisted space that want to go public, and they will see a lot of interest in the public market for going public. So I think that's going to be wonderful for those entrepreneurs. But even prior to that, if you look at the venture space, India has a very thriving venture capital market, one of the most thriving venture capital markets in the world today. And if you even look at the drone space, for example, we have, I think, more than 50 companies in the drone space, and you've done some work in that as well. Um, so we can talk a bit more about that as we go forward. Um, so if you look at the venture side, there is clearly incentives for the people in the venture industry to fund businesses. We have risk capital. We have a lot of people in India who are willing to fund businesses. Many of these businesses will fail, no question about it. But some of them are going to succeed. But now we are seeing the role of incentives that financial markets provide to entrepreneurs. They have seen, as you mentioned in your introductory talk, that how India has conducted Operation Sindoor. And I think from a marketing point of view, if you look at it, what the DGMO presentations did, the three DGMO chiefs went and they were not doing a marketing presentation, but I was looking at it from a different point of view altogether. I think it was one of the most brilliant marketing presentations done for the Indian defense industry. Those depiction of what India did in Operation Sindoor in those 23 minutes, it was really a depiction of the capability of India's both the offensive and the defensive capabilities. If you look at what we did in those 23 minutes on the offensive side, it was actually a description or an invitation to the world that look what we are capable of. And if you look at what has happened since, there are a whole bunch of countries who want to now buy stuff from us. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of countries who want to work with India, and that's, I think, going to be wonderful as you go forward.
Sanjay, we'll just come back to and take up the point of inflection that you discussed. But before that, I just want to explore the why of this happened. I mean, what we are seeing, defense stocks go up, and you mentioned these startups, and I think you did say that 300 odd startups are there in defense already. So that is the manifestation. But what has created this is, like I said, not happened in a vacuum. So, if we step back and we looked at a bunch of things, one is the policy framework. Second is where the economy is today. So hypothetically, if this situation had happened in 1971, I don't think India would have had this kind of launch pad that we have today. Today, the capability of this country is dramatic in various spheres. It's not just defense. We're producing electronics for exports. We're among the largest manufacturer of automobiles. UPI, I mean payments business, world
right.
beater. So the ISRO, there's a range of things.
Yep.
So can we just begin with the policy framework?
Yep.
How it, this entry of private sector,
Yep.
which is into a traditionally guarded space, and then move
Yep.
on to the other parts.
It's a great point, Anil. It's like what Shakespeare said in one of the plays that, there's a tide in the affairs of men, taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Basically, the idea is, if you're at the right place at the right time and things happen, you just have to be there. And then and the wave comes and it takes you with that. And we saw that if you go back in the year 2000, Indian IT industry was there. And then we had this Y2K moment. It was an opportunity, and a lot of people thought that Y2K will happen, and then there will be a huge demand creation, and then when Y2K goes away, then it will be the end of Indian IT industry. That didn't happen. It was an inflection point, and it was a leapfrog effect for us. And we've seen what happened to the India IT services industry. It became a very big part of India's GDP. The second big inflection point that comes to my mind is what happened with the payment space. You talked about that, and maybe you can tell us more about what happened in the UPI came, and of course, we had the cheapest mobile telephony in the world. We had the Jio, and we had Airtel, the competition, and we had the cheapest. The way the adoption happened of mobile telephony. And then the UPI came, and we had a leapfrog. Today we have more volume in UPI than any other payment gateways in the world. We actually crossed Visa recently, so it's something that wouldn't have happened. We have to have all these things happen together. So that happened. Of course, UPI was government sponsored. It is government sponsored and subsidized. So that has happened. So it's public asset made available to private companies, which are built on top of that, and we've seen how that has played so beautifully. In the defense space, as we were talking, we always had companies which have been there. I was watching Nitin's interview, which you were also there in
Baba Kalyani.
Baba Kalyani's interview, which I think everybody should watch. He has done some really cool things. Maybe you can tell us more about the story about Baba Kalyani's, what he did with the guns.
Actually, Baba Kalyani's story is urban legend. As far as everybody knows about him. So that interview, what came through was I look back and I think the one thing he was very clear was, he said, yes, we can, in an area, defense. And the anecdotal story that he shared, which probably struck you too, was the fact that he first produced the gun in 2012 and showcased it at the Pragati Maidan Defense Expo, people laughed at him, including the defense and military people. And they asked him, why are you interested in guns? You're nowhere even remotely linked to it. He said, it's my passion. And 3 years later, government changed, policy changed, and today Baba Kalyani is a key figure in India's private sector and defense. So it was, like you said, happy convergence. In fact, UPI, what you said is so true. You had Aadhaar, which was rolled out in 2009,
Absolutely, yeah.
which is the basis of the India stack.
Yep.
The India stack, that ability of Nandan and his team to,
Yeah.
break apart a transaction into identity, mobility, the
Yep.
jam. I mean, it's not just UPI. They use the same technology to transfer welfare
Yep.
money, and it has saved the exchequer 3 lakh crores.
Yep.
I mean, cumulatively.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you that convergence.
I mean, there is this other side of UPI. There is something to be said about privacy, and what is Aadhaar. There are things which are not good for privacy, and their security issues and all that, their fraud and all that. But there is a huge plus for India, which is also there. If you look at the net balance, I think we are hugely better off by having these things in place. And you look at it from a holistic point of view, the leapfrog effect that we have seen. And when you apply these analogies to other domains, we saw what happened in Y2K, we've seen what happened. And as you were mentioning earlier, that when you do this now, because India is now the world's fourth largest economy, and we're going to be the third one. We are no longer beggars, that we used to be, as many of our neighbors are right now. So we have that. We are so far ahead of them. So we have the ability to combine various technologies, and we have actually done that. If you look at how our defense systems, our air defense systems have performed in the recent past. I'm not a defense expert, but I've seen what is.
Neither have
We've
I.
all seen what has happened. We've all witnessed what happened when missiles were coming in and drones were coming in. They were shot down, and it was a combination of homegrown technologies. It was a combination of satellite technologies, a combination of course, we had the S-400, we had the homegrown Akash. We have people behind it who are all Indian people. We have used old guns. We have enabled them with AI. And Indians are really good at that. We are frugal innovators. We are really, really good at combining technologies from around the world, putting them together. We are system integrators. We've done that in the IT space. If you look at what we have done in the banking industry, for example, we will have a core banking system. We will have a credit card system from some other bank, from some other IT vendor. We will have, different components, and we have been doing this for the longest time. And the way I see it, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we will be providing defense as a service to our friendly countries, of course. Going forward, it won't be just defense equipment exports, but why can we not do it in the services as going forward? I think in the next 20 or 30 years, a much larger part of India's GDP will come from defense export, not just products but also services. I think there's a great capability. If you look at what is happening today, we are not having soldiers going across borders and killing other soldiers and getting killed in the process. That happens unfortunately once in a while on the borders. But it's, for the most part, battles are now being fought in code. They are actually being fought in, there are some visuals which I want to share with you, which will display, which are being done.
It's like a gaming console almost.
It's a gaming console, and basically it's IT driven. And who better in that space than Indians? So we are already good at that. We are the best in the world in that. And if you can do that and we have already demonstrated that we are really good at this, and we've seen subsequently, how tough it is for even Israel, to defend itself from what's happening from Iran, and we've seen how tough it was for even Russia to. And it's very asymmetric, how the rules of battle are changing so crazily. Why do you want to have a $75 million plane which doesn't fly for the most part, lying somewhere? It's a sitting duck, when a $1,000 drone can come and destroy it. So you need to have a very strong air defense system. You need to be able to track these things, and that requires IT skills. That requires your ability to be able to see these things coming in. That requires your ability to have massively capable radar systems. That's all IT driven. And we are very good at that. And if we can do that ourselves, we have demonstrated that. We have inward inquiries, we can do that for other countries also. I think that's going to be a very big thing for us.
So Sanjay, you mentioned during the conversation how UPI is subsidized by the government. So you actually took me to this thought of the risk element in any business. In a normal business, there is a lot of risk. The biggest risk is there a market for this and is there a buyer for a product? So you look at consumer goods, so many companies fall by the wayside. But what we see in UPI is that thanks to the subsidy element and of course the scale at which it was achieved, the market was not a problem. Now in defense, when you come back here, we look at the fact, one, it was totally guarded, then the government opened it up to private sector.
Yeah.
But why would the private sector get into it unless there is an assured buyer? And this is only one buyer, the government of India. But as you pointed out, in a battle, it creates a certain emergency, amplifies the risks, and fast forwards a lot of investment decisions which would have otherwise taken years.
Absolutely.
In this case, we are seeing that happen.
Yep.
So, de-risking, I just want to put a spotlight on that. How, defense business is de-risked and thereby making it more incentivized for private sector to come in. Is that right, surmise?
So that's a great question. Again, look holistically. In a private sector, one big risk that you have is that you have to sell stuff to other private sector customers and then wait for the payment to come. You have a problem of getting recoveries. You have receivables, and then you have delayed payments, and then you have bad debts, and then you have to chase customers, and then you have to go to court to chase money. If you have a business which is selling to the government and particularly to the central government, and the product that you're selling is so essential for the defense of the nation, then the government is going to pay you, and they're going to pay you on time. Particularly if you're making something that is so essential for the defense of the nation, you will get paid on time. In fact, I've known companies in the past, I've made some investments in the past in India's defense, in companies that are helping India's defense capabilities, that you get paid in advance. So if you think about it, not only do you get paid in advance, you have order books going 15, 20 years. You don't need a marketing department. Think about that. If you really look at the comparison between selling to other customers in India, where you have to chase for payments, and it's tough, it's very bad, it's very difficult, and we know what happens if you have to end up in a court or you have to end up with NCLT. We've seen how that has not really worked out the way it was promised. It's terrible to do that, and you compare that with selling to a B2G with the caveat that the money being is to be recovered from a government department to whom you have sold something that is so strategically important for the nation, that you will get paid. In fact, today it so happens that one of my wife's childhood buds, who was in the army, who retired a while back, he is running a joint venture with a European company which manufactures drones. And he was holidaying with us in April in Arunachal Pradesh, and we come back and Operation Sindoor happens. And the government has told him to go and get drones, more drones for us, and here is the money. Get us more drones. Those drones have worked very well. Here is the money. Don't waste time. Get us more drones. We need the drones. It's that urgency. So you're right about it, that when the war happens, there's a sense of urgency, and then you add the fact that there is this element of patriotism that comes in. A lot of Indians have seen what has happened. We've seen what happened in Pahalgam. We've seen the name Operation Sindoor, where the name came about, and we've seen how India responded, and we've seen children seeing missiles coming over the border and being shot down. I think it reminds me of Abdul Kalam's book, which was about igniting minds. I think that's sparking the imagination of youngsters of India to see that this is possible, that we can do it, Indians can do it. This was not possible 30 years ago. We didn't have venture capital. We didn't have financial markets the way we have. We were not the largest economy. We didn't have the capability. We didn't have strong leadership. We have now a confluence of factors which allow us to be able to at least achieve our dreams. And there are enough youngsters out there, people who are much younger than you and me.
We have vintage.
We can only pontificate sitting in your office here, but there are enough youngsters who can actually go and do these things. And I know some of these people. They are driven. They see these things. They say, we have to do this. We have to do a startup. Many of them will fail, no question about it. But not all of them will fail. Some of them are going to succeed and succeed spectacularly, and they will become hopefully multi-billion-dollar companies. And the markets are there to support them. So we have the ecosystem. We have the venture capital. We have the stock market. We have growth capital. We have risk capital. We have secondary public markets. We have IPO market. We have everything available over here to support the entrepreneurs to come forward and do that. And then we have the government support. We have now government which trusts the private sector to come, even in the defense space, that we will give you support, we'll give you orders, we'll give you our designs, we'll tell you what we want. We just want you to do this for us and do it fast.
So what you're saying, Sanjay, is that there's an ecosystem which exists, and most importantly, the finance part of the ecosystem, not just the receivables as far as the government goes, but in funding these investments. I just want you to put on your investor hat here and tell us, how does it work when a VC looks at this 300 startups that we talked about defense?
If I was a VC, I would look at, I would love to be, I would actually want to be into defense VC space right now. I'm sure there are enough VCs out there who are doing exactly what I'm saying right now. You see, when you are going to look at that space, you're going to see what kind of risk you're going to have. Order book is not a problem because India is going to spend a lot of money. See, we don't have a lot of friendly neighbors around. We're going to be spending a lot of money on defense, and we can. As our economy grows, we will be spending more money on defense, and we can afford to do that. The beauty is we are up against enemies, at least on one side of the border, where they don't have the money to be able to spend as much as we can. So we have to spend money. It's like, what you call an offensive capex. Is the money that we are spending to stay ahead of the curve. Those guys have to spend just to stay in the game. So they are bankrupt already.
They'll be defensive capex.
So they have to spend their money just to stay in the game. If they don't spend it, they are screwed. If they do spend it, they're still screwed because we're going to be so far ahead. The gap between the two countries is like a natural experiment. If you think about what has happened in South Korea and North Korea, and East Germany and West Germany, and in Pakistan and India, 3 countries went different directions. And how India has leapfrogged, the size of the 3 different countries, in terms of economies. What happened? We took capitalism in all the 3 cases. The ones who adopted capitalism and free markets, what has happened to those economies? So I think if you look at it from that perspective, you see that we have leapfrogged. We have gone to number 4 in the world and number 3. There's no way they can catch up. So we have the capability of spending tons and tons of money, and we're going to do that. And of course, this is one of those situations where India is very aware of the need to indigenize. This is the beauty of it. We don't want to import. We want to indigenize. Even the French people, even the Russians are willing to give us the designs they want to, manufacture in India. This was unprecedented. This never happened before, Anil. The first time we have French, it's yet to happen, but at least the signs are there that the French government and the Russian government are willing to allow the manufacture of their most modern aircraft to happen in this country.
Sanjay, you mentioned that how VCs will be desperate to get their teeth into this business opportunity. Is it happening?
VCs are there to make money. Yeah, it is happening. It will happen. There are VCs in the consumer businesses. There are VCs. There will be. There are VCs even in the. You tell me. You've already met companies which have, or Nitin has gone and met companies. There are companies, small companies. He's gone to the shop floor of companies who are actually making stuff for the Indian Army. And some of them are privately funded by the private equity capital or the venture capital space, and there are going to be many more. Why would it not be there? Look at the stock market valuation. These companies are selling for 70, 80 times earnings, and there are so few of them right now. If you look at how the demand for their products is exploding in India and outside of India, and we have a cost advantage. If you look at the numbers, the price point at which we can make these things are a small fraction at which the Europeans and the Americans can make it. So, the demand is there, the cost advantage is there. And I was looking at some of the things that we have done. I have this CRISIL document with me. What we have done in vaccines. what we have done in in medicine, we are going to replicate that in defense. We have the capability of doing that. I was reading this CRISIL research document. A dental implant in the US costs $2,800. In India, it costs $1,000. If a heart bypass surgery, and Dr. Devi Shetty is the pioneer in this. A heart bypass surgery in the US costs $144,000. In India, it costs $5,000. And the clinical outcomes are the best in the world. So it's not like we are cutting corners. We are cutting costs without cutting corners. And there is a way, the concept of frugal innovation applies here. So we are not just cutting costs. We have a way of delivering the best quality at low price points. In my world,
ISRO, the best example.
absolutely, we can land on Mars at a price which is less than the price that a Hollywood company spends on making a movie about going to Mars.
True.
It's like insane at what we can do. So, a heart valve replacement costs $170,000 in the US. It costs $5,500 in India. This is CRISIL research document. So, if we can do this, we have already done it in vaccines. We have done it in surgery, and clearly, if you look at any of the numbers in costs in the missiles that we are making, in the aircraft that we are making. And by the way, we don't need those fancy aircraft. Today, we have shown that you don't even have to cross the airspace. The missiles are we are now reaching Mach 3 and Mach 4, and they are so fast, and the ranges are so high, so large. You don't need to even cross into the airspace. So why do you need a $75 million, a jet, a fighter jet? You don't need to spend that kind of money, especially when they are so vulnerable on the ground. We've seen what happened to Russia. So, basically the whole cost-benefit analysis of spending money on Air Force is going to change dramatically. In that, the whole shift happens. Why do you have to spend so much money on such an expensive piece of equipment? Why not go to something which is much cheaper and much more effective? And India is very well placed in offering solutions over there. I think it's going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
In fact, just to add to the point on the ecosystem, what one is observing now, particularly if you look at IITs and other engineering institutions, is the emergence of the academic industrial complex. Previously, a lot of the research in IITs was mainly academic and very little commercial application. But now increasingly you're seeing that.
Well, this is where we stop. I have become the interviewer because you've been to IIT Madras 3 times.
I just want to get your thoughts. This further bolsters the ecosystem. So what you're saying is that, look, there is enough business case for defense, given all that we discussed. Second, there is no shortage of money. Third, there is no shortage of entrepreneurial capability. The young generation is proving to be better than any generation India has produced. And now on top of that, you have this combination of academic industrial complex.
Absolutely.
You have a foot on both. So can you?
Well, I love to say this. I know it may be politically incorrect to say it, but I'll say it anyway. Which is that, we are up against a neighbor who sends their kids to madrasas, but we are sending our kids to IIT Madras. There is no competition.
I think IIT Madras will be very glad to hear that, but not in this context, I'm sure.
No, but you've been there thrice recently, and you've done some 3 amazing interviews. Why don't you tell us more about what happened, at least in one of the one with the innovation interview that you did?
I did 3 interviews, you're right. One was on the startup space. They are promoting their own bunch of startups. The other was this fascinating brain center. The guy who's heading it, the scientist, and what they've achieved. It's actually a world first.
Yeah.
What India has achieved, creating a 3D image of a 18-month fetus.
Yeah.
And nobody has done this in the world. And now an adult brain a 3D will be created. And very important because I didn't know this till that interview.
Right.
That you cannot look inside a human brain when you're alive because the skull is so thick. No MRI, nothing can penetrate beyond a millimeter or centimeter. Mm-hmm. So which means, you can only work on a brain of a person who's deceased, immediately deceased. You have to harvest that brain. So it's not easy. So which is why nobody's been able to do it. So these guys have done that, and most importantly, it's allowing them to ask questions which you couldn't ask. You could ask earlier, but you never had answers. Simple example: if you had a stroke, we have a brain stroke. So why is it that it affects certain part of your brain and not the other part? So not the other part you never knew because you didn't see the other part of the brain. But now that you have a 3D image, you figure out the kind of topography of the brain, which you could never. So that is, of course, the third, which is, I think, the best to me in the current context, is the IIT director, Mr. Kamakoti, and where he talked about how from labs to launch pads. So in fact, they were part of this Operation Sindoor. They're startups and they worked on the vaccine project. IIT Madras was a key input into the project, and the success of the vaccine project. No country in the world has managed some 1.4 crore, 1.4 billion people twice, 2.5 times, some had third doses, in seamlessly. You could take it wherever you wanted. If you took the first one in Chennai, the second one you could take in Noida or so on, and seamlessly at that. I think Professor Kamakoti talked about that, and our primary conversation was about taking AI to the grassroots, and they had co-produced a product.
So are you saying that we always had this wonderful research in academia, but it's only now in the last 10-15 years that research is being made available to the private sector, and more importantly to private sector which can be funded with venture capital and then go on to become successful businesses, and some of those businesses will be in the defense space also. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, the chicken and egg syndrome. So there was no incentive for the private sector to go to the IITs and tap them for technology because there was no market.
Right.
So that cycle broke. Like we discussed earlier, there's now a happy convergence of trends in India.
Right. This is one of my most brilliant ex-students. I actually spoke about him in my previous podcast also. He's done very well for himself. He happens to be hanging out a lot in IIT Madras, and he tells me that he goes and meets this startup and that startup, and he's been putting some money in some startups, and he tells me, sir, I like to go to IIT Madras a lot. So a lot of startups are there, and a lot of these early stage value investor type people, some of them I know, one of them at least I know, are hanging out in that space. So it's very interesting to know that this is happening.
So great, which means that academic industrial complex is now part of this ecosystem. So which reinforces your argument that defense is going to be a very attractive investment destination.
Absolutely.
Right? So Operation Sindoor in that sense is a watershed moment for India.
I hope so. Well, we'll know in a few years, but I certainly hope so. I see the parallels. I see two, at least there will probably be more, but I see the parallel with Y2K moment for the Indian IT industry. I see the parallel with what we were discussing. It was originally your idea, I should give credit to you, about what happened in the payment space with the UPI, I think, because you've done some work in that. And now we're seeing the Operation Sindoor. I think these parallels are relevant.
Okay, Sanjay, another part of the ecosystem that we're talking about is the small and medium sector. A lot of these products cannot be produced in-house for anyone. Even Bharat Forge cannot make the entire gun on their own. So they need to source it. The problem in India is the small sector has been one sector which has been deprived of finance for various reasons. It's not exactly the state of the art. But we have a very good success story in Maruti. Maruti Udyog didn't create an automobile company. They created an automobile industry in India.
Right.
They taught us how to drive. I mean, it was the first time we also passed hearing. More importantly, I think they created this city of Gurgaon. And Gurgaon grew around the ecosystem of Maruti. So can we see, now we are seeing defense corridors coming up in the country. There's one in Lucknow, Allahabad. There's one in Hyderabad. So are we seeing now, possibility of a Maruti moment happening in defense across the country?
I hope so. I think you remind me, the Chief Minister of UP had inaugurated a factory there doing something. No? They've got some...
They produce those guns. I think they're talking about that. The AK-47s?
No. Even beyond that. Some foreign company is going to set up a factory in India. I don't remember that.
Okay. No, I don't recall.
So there is going to be definitely UP is going to become a place where there will be manufacturing of defense equipment in India, and I think government also realizes, if they can do what they have done with iPhones, why can they not do that with defense equipment? You see, it's all about incentives. If you have seen that with SEZ, we've seen that with PLI scheme. PLI fits beautifully here. We've seen what PLI has done for the manufacture of electronics in India, and electronics exports I was reading as becoming a very big. They're actually growing more than 50%, and it could be because of de-risking from China. Could be because of tariffs being levied against China. Could be multiple reasons. But the fact of the matter is that part of the reason is that Indian government realizes that if you give incentives to the private sector, they will come. Basic simple logic is, if you start trusting the private sector and allow them to make money, there is no shortage of capital. The world is awash with capital looking for making a return on that capital. If you give them certainty, if you give them a good order book, or
A de-risked framework. So.
de-risk framework, and give them a stable environment, money will come, and investment will. More importantly, investment will come. There will be a lot of capex that will happen, and whether that it will happen in a very major way in the defense industry, I think.
And you did talk about exports, and definitely a demonstrative effect of Operation Sindoor we are witnessing. Philippines is, I think, one of the first countries.
Yep.
They have been talking to India, to be fair, for some time, but Operation Sindoor convinced them.
You made a very good point. Philippines can't afford to buy Rafales. They can't. They don't have the size. The number of economies that can afford to buy Rafales are so few. Think about that. Look at the size of the market. From a business point of view, the size of the market. The number of countries that can afford to buy a Tejas is far, far more than those who can afford to buy a Rafale. And if you can bring down the cost of Tejas and you make it more effective with more localized, if you can make our own engines, the Kaveri engine thing that we were talking about the other day, I think that fits in beautifully. And part of the reason, I was watching this thing about Fund Kaveri after this thing happened, Sindoor thing happened. People are willing to pay more taxes. I hope so, to fund India's defense exports. I was reading about people were saying that, okay, I don't mind paying GST on the caramelized popcorn. It was a joke, of course, but I think there is this sense of patriotism in India that people are very happy that our money is not going wasted. It's being spent on India's defense. We have been able to thwart the attacks from an enemy country, and we have been able to effectively give a response, a very effective response. And that, I think, makes a very big difference. And that creates incentives to spend money and invest. And it will attract a lot of attention, a lot of orders from potential customers around the world, friendly customers around the world. And I think we will not have a problem in selling these things. We just have to do the right things. We have to make sure that we can still do frugal innovation. We have the capability of making these things effectively and cost-efficient manner. Enough market is out there for us. Because if you look at the cost structures of these things, it's like, again, going back to the same point. When you are competing with a country which has got a cost structure for heart bypass, which is costing a patient to spend $144,000, and you are spending $5,000, they're going to fly down here, and they are doing that. A lot of medical tourism. If you go to any of these fancy hospitals in India, a lot of these people are flying down from all over the world to get their surgeries done. Right? It makes sense to do that. So why would it not make sense for other countries around? Philippines is just one representative example of a country which can't afford to buy a Rafale, but probably can afford to buy a Tejas.
So in a way, what you're saying also, like, let's stick with the medical tourism example. If an American is coming here for surgery, he will expect some level of standards to to which they are used in the West. So which also means that domestic standards to go up to match these. I'm not.
I don't know if you've
I'm
been
talking,
to the standards of the US. You go to the US, we have better standards here.
luckily, I haven't had any medical
You go and
emergency.
try to get an MRI done over there, you have to wait 6 months.
No, I meant in the quality of care. There will be. Okay,
Quality of care?
my larger point.
You ring a bell, 3 nurses come running towards
Okay,
you.
no, my larger point is the skill levels.
Yeah.
What it does, it reinforces and incentivizes India to improve its own skill levels. So maybe medical tourism is not the right example. Like in defense exports,
Yeah.
say the BrahMos has now become a
Yep.
world-class missile, right? Though similarly,
BrahMos,
Akash.
actually, we need permission from Russia. It's a joint venture.
Correct.
So it's not Akash is Indian, so it's our baby. We can do whatever we want. So it's what is our own thing, our own technology. We can do whatever we want with it.
So-
we may not want to because it's proprietary. It's important that we keep the technology. We may not want to give it to anybody out there, but we have the capability of doing it if should we desire to do that.
Yeah, my point is that when you create an export market, there are certain standards you have to maintain, which means your domestic capability also grows, right?
Yes.
Now, this in turn creates a force multiplier, which this IIT Brain Center chief had pointed out to
Right.
me, said that, Anil, we have Indians in positions worldwide, whether you look at Google, NASA, there are Indian origin people doing cutting edge work
Yes,
out there.
yes.
They think, but they do it outside the country.
Yes.
When we do the research, like I was giving the brain center example, so you are doing something of world class within the country, so which attracts global attention, global talent, and it creates a demonstrative effect around the brain center.
So you're talking about reverse brain drain?
No,
People
I
coming
meant
back?
no. I'm saying raising domestic capability.
Of
So
course.
it's like, say, the Chenab Bridge has inspired a generation of new civil engineers, I suspect.
Absolutely.
Because the sheer sophistication.
Absolutely.
So do you believe that this defense capability, as it grows, will create a similar incentive for really, smart hardware, software personnel to invest in their skills?
Absolutely, and I certainly hope so, because this is what inspires the youngsters, right? Because they see the capability being demonstrated, and which is why I go back to the presentation of DGMO. It was not just a presentation to the enemy or to the public in India. It was a demonstration of India's capabilities to the world at large. It had ramifications for not just to the defense establishment, but to the world at large, that we are here, we have arrived, we are open for business. If you want, we can show, these are our capabilities, and the world has seen that. So it is a call to the youngsters that, you should be in this space. A lot of, imagine that if you are an Air Force officer, how much has world has changed in just 2 months. You've had Sindoor, then you've had Ukraine going into Russia and doing what they've done. Now you have Iran and
Israel. What they
Israel
did to
thing
Iran.
happening. So, the whole world has changed, and we don't know what will happen in the next 2 months. It's very hard to say. But the point I'm making is that the world of war is changing very, very rapidly. And I think in these 3 things that have happened, India has really demonstrated its capabilities beautifully. And I think a big part of the reason I feel is that we are dealing with a next door neighbor who we know very well. So we know it's like a domain expertise. We know what they have, we know what the capabilities are, and we have been able to do that. So we have the domain knowledge. And therefore, if we are dealing with a friendly nation who is also dealing with an unfriendly neighbor and they have domain knowledge, we can provide customized solutions to them. We can go and do the work. I have an analogy here. So I invested in a company which makes high chrome grinding media, AIA Engineering, long back. Wonderful company. This company is number 2 in the world. They go and take soil from different mines around the world. They come back over here, they put them in their own labs, and they may provide customized solutions for every mine in the world, and they make grinding media that will work for that mine. So we are very good at making solutions which are going to solve the problem for your exact problem. This is something which we are very good at. We have an investment in a company called CCL Products, which makes 1,000 different blends of coffee for customers in more than 90 countries. They know which North Ukraine people will like this blend of coffee, this percentage of coffee beans from Vietnam, this plantation, this much from this. They know the exact blend. So we are very good at finding out what people like, what will work in what part of the North Ukraine, what will work in South Ukraine, and so on and so forth.
Sanjay, I want to take you back to the risk framework. What you just said. You said the nature of war is changing so fast. So, like today, drones are the in thing. Tomorrow, we don't know what it will be. So, given this framework, private
Whatever
sector,
it will be, the big picture, sorry to interrupt, is going to be more towards IT. It will be less towards
Fair
dishum and more towards IT.
Fair enough, I get
It will not be like Mahabharata anymore. It will be more towards
software.
IT.
It will be software driving hardware.
It will be exactly.
So the other, not the
Which
other way
means
around.
more IT. The more it becomes technology, India will shine there because it requires brain bog, which is where the IIT Madras fellow comes in.
So, given this exponential change that we are talking about, not exponential as a wrong phrase, this accelerated pace of change, doesn't that introduce a risk element in terms of redundancy? So you invest in a capacity which is to produce a certain class of military goods. That becomes irrelevant because the nature of war changes in 6 months. So how does a private sector, a small entrepreneur, large entrepreneur mitigate against such risks?
Great question. Again, depends on whether you have one product or 10 products. You're basically asking a question about obsolescence. Obsolescence could be a threat, it could be an opportunity. Obsolescence, so take the example of somebody like TSMC. TSMC is a large company which makes semiconductors, and you have companies like Nvidia. For them, they want to drive obsolescence. They want to spend so much money. They want to basically make the old stuff obsolete very, very quickly. They spend billions and tens of billions of dollars every year in research because they want to make something that was very modern and gung-ho only recently obsolete, because they want the others to also blow up money on the competitors, and they basically die doing that. So it depends on how obsolescence can be an opportunity, can be a threat. If you are driving obsolescence, it's an opportunity for you. If you are threatened by obsolescence because you're behind, you don't want it. You're going to evaporate. So for us, if you look at countries and nations, India is way ahead of at least one of the neighbors. So we are driving that thing, and we are hopefully catching up with the other neighbor.
Okay. Now that we go into a final leg of our conversation, I wanted to take you back to your career as a investor, academic, and various. You experienced India from the 1991 moment onwards, right? The liberalization phase. So looking back, I believe India's liberalization didn't happen in 1991 alone. The foundations were in 1980, and gradually, change in India is always gradual and incremental. 1991 was the benchmark watershed moment, agreed.
Right.
But now you look back, there is one thing which has not changed within the old industry. The attitude towards investment is caution first, and the license Raj era still dogs them, and the phase of crony capitalism still binds them. But you have on the other side, you have a generation of young entrepreneurs, some of them again in these IITs, Agnikul, which came out of IIT Madras, doing fantastic work in space. So they are generation of new entrepreneurs emerging. So where are we in this phase of India's entrepreneurial journey? Are the old guys still calling the shots because they have the wealth, or the
good thing about humans is that we don't live forever. So old ideas will go away. These these guys are going to go away, and the new guys are going to come in. So we have a median age of 28 right now. We are still a very young country. We have a dynamic culture, and as I said, our kids go to IITs. They don't go to madrasas. So that's a good thing, great thing for us. We have a very dynamic young population. We have driven people. There are problems in India, no question about it. If you look at the whole world out there, there's no other place to be. And I think this is a great thing about India, is that we have a country full of young entrepreneurs who are willing to take risks. And we have an ecosystem which is willing to fund these people. This was not the case when you and I started. we are similar age. We didn't have people who were willing to fund us. We had to slog our asses. We're still doing that, but the point is now, young people are able to get funding because they have a dream and a vision, and they have great presentation skills, and they can go and sell a dream. And most of them are going to fail, and which is fine. Failure is no longer seen as a black spot on your CV. It's actually meant to be. It looks good on your CV unless you have had some failures. VCs actually want to look at how many failures you have had before they write you another check. So it's no longer considered as a stigma, which is a great thing, right? Because failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is an ingredient of success. Not my original quote. I'm quoting somebody. I don't remember who though.
No, your point about our generation is so true, because electricity is something which has only become saturation coverage 5 years ago.
Right.
I find it even now tough to imagine, but it's a fact that last 10 years you have banked 40 crore people, which is 400 million people, more than the population of the United States. So people didn't have a bank account,
Yeah.
people didn't have electricity, people didn't have toilets. All that basic elements of life have been sorted.
Yeah.
So which gives you a better foundation. Like
I must interrupt you again and say that viewers should know that if there is one guy who has been highlighting all this and screaming and pounding the table about this for the last at least 4 or 5 years, it's this guy. So he has been doing this a lot, and not enough appreciation has been done, and he's been doing this I think with a sense of patriotism, which I think is laudable. I genuinely mean it here. It's something that should be people should at least follow him and see the kind of things that he has done over the last, and not just him. Many of his colleagues are doing the same thing.
Thank you for that endorsement. I thought for a moment you were going to talk about Nandan Nilekani, so who actually has done more for this country than anyone gives him enough credit for.
Okay.
Aadhaar to me is the
All right.
tipping point in India's transformative scale.
I would have thought you would have talked about so many other people. You have met so many wonderful people. In fact, you were talking about the best interview you ever had was the IIT
Brain Center, yes. Mohana Shankar, he was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people with such knowledge and skill sets, their humility is staggering. Anyway, thanks Sanjay for coming down to our studios for a very enlightening.
Thank you for having me, Anil. Yeah, absolutely delighted. Thank you.
Operation Sindoor showed us that India can fight and win on its own terms. But as Sanjay reminded us today, the real success lies in India's ability to align innovation, capital, and national interest. In fact, I believe this business of defense could be the next investment frontier for India. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to StratNewsGlobal.Tech on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please do share your thoughts, ideas and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.